Lastly, I can't end an event without talking to our undocumented folks. So if you're watching and if you're here, know that we see you, that we love you, that no policy, no status could ever define your humanity, and that at the end of the day, we will win.
Jonathan Jays Green was only 13 years old when they first arrived in the United States.
Yeah, it was like a really turbulent time in that our family lost status shortly after our arrival.
Like many of us, Jonathan had to navigate the challenges of a new country and overcome language barriers, all while defining themselves at intersection after intersection after intersection, living every day with the constant uncertainty of being undocumented, yet, through it all, finding a light and a power inside, guided by many on the outside who believed in them, supported them, and now count on them. That is a lot to put on someone who is still trying to find their footing in what has often been rough, muddy, unpaved terrains. Terrains that they had to take and smooth out for others to have an easier path. This journey of self-discovery recently took Jonathan back to Panama, where they reconnected with family and rediscovered parts of themselves that had been waiting to be uncovered. It was a visit filled with healing, reflection, and a deepened understanding of themselves and the tremendous responsibility to clear a path for others. ¿Qué tal? I'm Antonio Tijerino, host of the Fritanga podcast by the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. On today's episode, we explore the themes of identity, belonging, and resilience with our guest, Jonathan Jays Green, a trailblazing LGBTQ+ non-binary Afro-Latinx activist and an advocate on behalf of everyone, and I mean everyone. Jonathan has spent their entire career and life fighting for justice in a multitude of sectors, including government, nonprofit, political, and the private sector. They also served as the first undocumented person to work in the office of the governor in Maryland and was instrumental in passing the DREAM Act in the state. They co-founded UndocuBlack, a national organization fighting for immigrant and racial justice. Jonathan also served as National Latino Outreach Director on the Warren for President campaign and worked as a VP at the Marguerite Casey Foundation. Most recently, they earned a master's in public administration at the Harvard Kennedy School while completing a Gleitzman Fellowship at the Harvard Center for Public Leadership. Jonathan was also a recipient of the American Immigration Council's Immigrant Youth Achievement Award, and when our Hispanic Heritage Foundation honored Dreamers with our Inspira Award on stage at the Kennedy Center a few years ago and on PBS, I selected Jonathan and Belen to accept the award.
With or without DACA, we will fight to survive in this country we call home.
They really care, and I've seen them grow and carve a path not just for others, but for their self. Con un machete. Now let's fritanga. Jonathan, so good to see you.
Likewise, it's been a
I
while.
want to reach through and grab you and give you a huge hug.
I receive it and I give it right back.
So you were in Panama. I was following you. How was it? Did you see familia and connect with your roots?
Yeah, so I have, as you know, I've lived in the US for almost 20 years. And in that time, I had not been back to Panama. I left when I was 13 years old. And, because for most of my time in the US, I've been undocumented. I had not been able to go back. I was able to go this past summer in 2024, and it was quite the journey. I'm still processing. I think I'm going to be processing the entire experience, but I think it was overall a really beautiful opportunity to reconnect with my roots, reconnect with my people, reconnect with the land, and begin to heal a lot of wounds that were there both on my end and on their end as well.
It's funny you just said that, because I remember in Nicaragua when I hadn't been in a very long time for other reasons. You, because of your status. For me, it was more of just civil wars, all those things that go along with some of our home countries. And I remember going back after, I don't know, it must have been over 20 years. And it felt like I was visiting my ancestors' womb. Because you see the volcanoes, you see the lakes, the food, the smells. I remember getting off of the airplane, going into the airport, and that smell of like
Mm,
fabuloso that they use, the purple one on
yeah.
the lampazo,
Yes.
and then the smell of food, the
Yes.
quesillas and everything else that they're walking around holding, and
Yes.
then the smell of somebody burning something in their yard, whether it's
Mm,
palms, or branches
mm-hmm,
or garbage,
mm-hmm,
whatever it was, but there's a
mm-hmm.
smell that is so comforting and recognizable that you're
Yeah.
back in this
Yep.
place. Um,
Yep.
did did you see family?
Yeah, so I'm really blessed with a large family. So my grandmother had 8 daughters. So my mom was one of 8 siblings, and also I have another half aunt, and so basically have a big family. My grandparents, I got to see them. I was really worried because they're getting up there in age. They're in their low to mid 90s, so I got to see them. We had a big family reunion, which was such a beautiful experience. Honestly, I cried for hours. And I think for me, it was such a beautiful reminder of how much love can still be had even with all of these political difficulties and borders, right? Like I hadn't been in touch with my family for a long time. And when I got there, when I got to their homes, when I ate their food, when
Mm.
we hugged, when we sang, when we danced, it was like time had not passed by. It was such a beautiful, rejuvenating, gutting, transformative experience to just be in their arms again, to walk through the streets of Colón. I'm from a city called Colón, which is the second largest city in Panama, and it's where a lot of the Black community in Panama lives. Right, it's on the Caribbean Ocean, and yeah, just to be able to walk through those streets, to get to visit my childhood home. My childhood home is no longer there, so it's been demolished, but to get to stand on that land and to feel the vibration, to all of a sudden be reminded of all these memories from when I was a kid, to close my eyes and feel like I was like 5 year old Jonathan again, was such a gift. And I think part of why I was so emotional throughout the entire trip is that, quite frankly, I did not conceivably believe that I could
Mm.
be back. I didn't think that I was going to see my family and that I would get to be back in Panama, that I would get to be back in Colón, that I would get to visit Nombre de Dios and Sabanitas and all these other neighborhoods that were so foundational to my time back in Panama. So I think I'm really shook, quite frankly, right? Like I got back to the US and back to my home in Boston, which I love. And yeah, I'm not the same. I'm not the same. So I'm taking time. I'm trying my best to be easy on myself and to make sense of like what this experience means for me, both now, but also moving forward.
So I actually, when I went after a long time, I had a very emotional experience in a lot of different ways. Just thinking about time that had passed from my last trip there, and what you said is very important. You feel like the child that you were when you left it. But then I started going back every year until recently when we had
Mm.
even other political and issues in
Yeah, yeah,
Nicaragua, and
yeah.
I can't go
Hmm.
back to see my father, who's 94 years old right now. But are you now going to go back? Because I ended up taking my children back there. So are you planning more trips now that you've been there? That seal?
I am. So the commitment that I made to my family is that I would try to be back at least once
Mm,
every year. That is my plan. I think as beautiful as it was to be back, I think there are a couple of things that stood out to me. I think one, in some ways, it feels like I got a glimpse of what my life could have been like if my family hadn't
yeah.
moved from Panama, right? Both to be in those places, to be with those folks, but also to be in a country that's going through so much. Panamanians just elected a new president, and I'm like slightly concerned about the direction of the country, both in terms of what I've seen on the ground, but also I think Panama continues to be a very conservative country. So I picked this time to go in particular because it was also Pride. There's a Panama City
Yeah.
Pride that's very nascent. I think this is like the fourth or fifth year that they've celebrated Pride. So I wanted to be like, what is the LGBTQ community in Panama? And I got to go to a drag brunch, which was so special. Um, but also it's just like as a reminder that like Panama as a country has a long way to go in terms of where they are with LGBTQ communities. Not too long ago, they put marriage equality for a referendum, and it, overwhelmingly did not pass. So thinking about sort of like what it would be like for me as like an openly queer, non-binary person to think about what I would have looked like existing in that country, right? In a country that's very religious. Yeah, there were like lots of tension points there. So I think that's like one piece. I think the second that I am like trying to grapple with is like, what is the meaning of home,
Mhm.
right? For such a long time, it felt like my home was like stolen from me, that I no longer had access to it. And I made home in lots of different places. In Maryland, I spent a lot of time in Maryland building community and have a lot of friends and family members in Maryland. Not blood, but chosen family members. Same with Boston now and Seattle. So I think I had given up on the idea that like home could be a literal place. I think I had just relegated home to being where my people are. And now that I have access to like the place that saw me being born and where I was raised for the first 13 years of my life, I think that's being complicated again. And then I'm thinking about what it means to be a global citizen. I think now that I can move across borders, now that I can travel both back to Panama, but also other places of this globe, like what is my responsibility now having access to this privilege? So I don't know the answer to those, but those are the questions that I'm asking.
Well, a couple of things there. Home is where you are, no matter where you are. And we remember during COVID, we all felt out of place, disenfranchised, disconnected, and we learned that home is
Hmm.
exactly where each of us is. And in all fairness to Panama, this country as well grapples with some of the same issues in, in terms
Yeah.
of being able to move forward with more unity, with more understanding, with more respect. And
Hmm.
we love all of our
Yeah.
countries.
Yeah.
I don't care where you are in the world, we're going to deal with some of the same
Mm.
issues.
Yeah. I mean, I think, can I clarify this piece here? Because it wasn't, because I think at times people hear me say that and feel like I'm like, oh, one is better than
Oh
the
no,
other.
I didn't
That's
take it
not
that way.
quite the case. I think, yeah, it's like more so like I get to choose which terrain I choose to exist in, right? And I think the calculation that I'm always making is like, what does it look like for me to be the freest, most authentic version of myself, and like navigating the different terrains, right? Like this place may struggle with this place may struggle with that, and like thinking about where are the pockets of freedom that I can carve out for myself. So that's kind of like where I was coming from. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the feeling in the U.S. is no moral authority right now.
I don't think any place is. I think everyone,
Yeah,
every
yeah,
country, every society, unfortunately,
yeah,
is grappling with homophobia and sexism and racism and everything else. And that
yeah,
dynamic of people feeling like
yeah,
they belong and feeling like they're free to be themselves. Um,
yeah, yeah. Oh my
and
goodness.
but the
Yes.
other thing is, I did you deal with some of the ni de aquí ni de allá? Because when I went back to Nicaragua, I was suddenly a gringo.
Yeah.
And I felt it, man. I took it
Mm,
personally. And then I came back here and I
yeah.
was like, when I came here when I was a little boy, I was like, I don't belong here. I don't feel like I belong. And then I'd go back and visit
Yeah.
Nicaragua and it was like, oh my goodness, I don't belong here. And then you go to different parts of
Oh
the
my
country. And
goodness.
I was raised in DC. And then all of a sudden I was in the Midwest after Civil War in Nicaragua living there. And I was like, well, I don't think I belong here, even though I felt like I belonged more in DC. So it's like gradations. Then you really discover, Jonathan, that soy de aquí y de allá. And 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 I think that's the beauty of getting there. And you're dealing with that now with Boston, with Maryland, DMV, Panama.
I would give this credit to my family, right? Because I didn't, mm, even though I hadn't been there for 20 years, the second I arrived at one of their homes, I felt like I belonged. Like they went out of their ways to be
Oh,
like, this is you. Like we may have been disconnected for so long, but we are one. So I think if anything, I felt like I didn't belong when I was in broader like culture, but like when I was in like the house of any of my aunts or my grandparents, I was very much like, oh wow, I just even actually like aspects of myself that I had forgotten came from my family. I think I was able to make sense of it. Like my laugh, like I have a very particular
a
laugh.
beautiful line.
That oftentimes people thank you, but oftentimes people point out to me because it stands out. But like if you go to my family reunion on that Saturday afternoon, everyone laughs the same way that I laugh, right? So like I'm like, oh wait, like this is where I get my laugh from. And so there were like so many of those tiny things that like I feel like I make more sense to myself having been with my family in Panama, which is such a beautiful gift to receive. I think the second thing, though, is that having lived for such an extended period of time in the U.S. and being around a lot of Latino communities in the U.S., I think maybe I lost perspective in some ways of how much like racism and classism like shaped our lives back in Panama is something that at times I doubted, right? Based on like how broader Latino communities talked about racism and classism, right? But like, because at times historians like, oh, we don't like race doesn't show up in the same way, or we don't talk about racism in the same way in Latin America. But I went back to my aunt's house, and that's all we talked about when we talked about the neglect of like the city that of Colón, right? And a lot of them kept telling me that they really felt like part of why they like the Panamanian government allowed the city of Colón to be in the state that it is as part is because that's where Black people live, right? And thinking about how they felt in their own words, they're marginalized because of race and because of class, felt really affirming to like how I had seen the world. But I think for a second, because I did not have that connection, I felt like, well, maybe I'm making it up, and turns out, no, I'm not. So I think that aspect, there were so many aspects of like how I see myself in the world that felt clarified being there. And that's why it's such a gift.
And it gives you that perspective that I appreciate you sharing because I just learned something. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing in all of our home countries that you have that classism, that racism, everything that categorizes you and you get less resources. And that's one of the things that we are trying to address is racism within the Latino community. We should know better. We don't like being targeted. And I've always said that activism starts at our kitchen tables. When you're listening to your abuelitos and abuelitas and your tios and your tias and your primos and you're saying the most racist, homophobic, sexist, ableist things, and yet it's kind of
Yeah.
cloaked
Yeah.
under some kind of cultural acceptance. And when I would say something, and I would always say something, and they would say, ay, sos tan gringo, así hablamos, así hablamos. And so I would love to hear what you say about this racism within the Latino community here in the United States as well as in our countries that we bring over.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. One of the really striking conversations I had with one of my aunts is that she was talking about her son who had studied finance and had a really great job, and he had just gotten laid off, and he was like traveling to another part of the country to look for jobs, and how scared she was of how they would treat him because of his skin color. And he's like about my complexion, and like the way that and I don't know that I'm going to translate this well, but the way that she was like, well, he's not like as dark as like this other member of the family, so like maybe they won't be as bad, but like and I'm like, oh wow, that you all also make this calculation,
On based
right?
on
Like it's
shades.
not.
Like that's
Yes, based on shades, yeah, that's colorism. But like so to see that, and again, like my posture going back to Panama was very much of like, let me just like listen and learn, right? Because I have not been here, and I don't want to inject my own like analysis, given the work that I've done in the United States. But just to see family members who I would not think of as like social justice warriors. I would just think about like people who are just trying to get by in their lives and just so clearly illustrate how they experience colorism and racism in their own community, in their own lives. I think just really illustrates the work that we have to do, right? Because that's a discrimination at the hands of other Latino and other Panamanian communities in the very same way that here in the United States, oftentimes I have heard or I've been told that like we need to focus on like all Latino people and like you need to come together, which I believe in unity, but I think we can't have unity unless we're having honest
Hmm.
conversations about the different realities of our people. So I think that is like part of the work that I want folks to continue to do. I think, quite frankly, I'm examining whether or not like what is my role in that body of work, right? So as you know, um, some of the work that I've done in the past with the Undocu Black Network has been organizing Black immigrants and also doing a lot of work in the Afro-Latino communities to make sure that we are seen, we are heard,
Yeah.
that our needs are met, and that we are able to address this anti-Blackness. But I think at this point, if I can be really honest with you, it's really tiring, right? To keep on having the same conversations for such a long time and not feel like we've moved as much as we would have liked to, right? And like, I know that the answer is not to give
Oh
up.
no,
I'm gonna be honest.
the
I know that it's
conversations,
not, but like,
but
I
the
am human.
conversations,
I am
it's,
human.
this is what I want to get to in all these paper that I have in front of me,
Yeah.
but the conversations have to be followed by actions. The conversations have to be followed
Yeah.
by solidarity and working with different groups. I am
Yeah.
very proud that we,
Yeah.
and shout out my man Marvin Carr with Walmart, that we are launching a racial solidarity campaign, an anti-racism campaign,
Mm,
and part of it will be aimed at the Latino community. And I
yeah.
would love to get you involved because we're as
Yeah.
good as who we're working with. And
Mm,
it's, it is tiring. This work is tiring. And let me just say, you're also fighting on a lot of different fronts. You're fighting as somebody that when you talk about intersectionality, it all meets at you pretty much. There's an extra weight when you're representing all of these different things. There's also an extra lift that you're representing all of these different parts of our community. And I can be an ally all I want. I'm an ally to someone else. So I'm an ally to Jonathan J's Green, but you're Jonathan J's Green. And here's the other thing too that I want to mention that people like, and this is probably why we're so close. People like you, me, Monica Ramirez, who I had in my office yesterday, and we were eating ice cream together. We feel things more than other people do. That, to me, that
yeah.
takes a toll
Yeah.
more than hard work, more than anything. I really feel for someone that's at the border. I feel
Hmm.
for somebody that's being made fun of in grade school because they're out. I feel
Yeah.
everything. I
Yeah.
feel for somebody that's a victim of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia
Yeah.
or somebody
Yeah.
that has to
Yeah.
deal with something. It's hard. I feel everything. I've always said I'm an emotional exhibitionist. I can't hide it either.
Yeah.
And but you're the same
Same.
way.
Same. We can't. We can't. It is what it is. Yes. I think, Tony, so I'm so grateful for you, and I'm excited to hear and learn more about this campaign that you're launching. And I think what I've always appreciated about you is that you've always been about action. So I'm really excited to see that and that you've continued to do that. I think for me, um, I'm trying to do something different and right, which I'm not good at. I'm not good at like pausing and reflecting and being still. But I deeply believe that that's what my work needs to be like right now. I don't know for how long, but in this moment, I just finished grad school. I just went back to Panama, and and this may not make a ton of sense, but I feel like I'm being called to something different than I've done before, and I don't quite understand it. I don't know. I feel like there's like something God's trying to tell me in this season of my life. Um, So my ask to you as like my friend, like yes, we're partners, but like my friend is to like help me figure out how to be still,
Oh
right? To like
yeah,
hold me
you're asking
accountable to
me
like
how to be still.
being still. Yes,
I'm
yes.
asking
I
you.
know, I know that. I know.
Inertia is
Listen,
my
this is why I
enemy.
said I'm
I
doing
don't know
something
how to be
different.
still.
I'm doing I but I really
Let's
believe that
both of
that's
us
what I'm
go
being
find
called
someone
to.
that can help us with that. Because, baby, I am the wrong. You and I are too much alike.
Listen, no, but I believe you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Oh, you're
I'm
calling
not
me
saying
an
you're
old
old
dog?
now. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that both you and I can learn new things, right? And like Tony, if, like, all jokes aside for a second, um, when I look at the state of the world, like the wars, the like conflicts, the like polarization in our communities, like I just yeah, I'm not sure that doing the same things we've done for a long time will be the answer. And like, I want to figure out like what is my role in like helping us move in that way, right? Like when I think about, yeah, I don't know what the answers are, and I'm deeply committed to like figuring out what they are. I feel like people oftentimes see leaders and they're like, oh, they always have the answer. I don't know. I don't have the answer right now, Tony. And like, I want to be able to like do the introspective work to figure that out.
I think that is so powerful. I would love to hear about it because when I was a little kid, I remember I used to box. And I remember getting hit really hard and I just kind of curled up. And the instructor at that time, a Nicaraguan guy, and I was a little kid, and he said to me, uh, don't cover up, just swing wildly. You might land something. When you're hurt, just swing wildly. And I took that with me for the rest of my
Mm,
life. And here I am,
mm, yeah.
as an old dog, as you just called me. Um,
No.
and I still live that. It's not necessarily the right thing, but my instinct is to swing wildly. So I need, even at this stage of my life, I need to be more thoughtful, take a step back,
Hmm.
take care of myself. Just like
Yeah,
everything you're saying as a young man,
yeah,
I'm saying to myself
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
I just can't get there, but I'm working
yeah,
on it too. Um, but at the same time, I'm very grateful that we actually get to see a crisis and have someone listen to us. A lot of people are in silence trying to think of how can I do something about this. We actually have platforms and relationships. I can call Monica Ramirez. We can make a phone call to Alejandra Castillo or someone
yeah,
and get advice and get partnership. And that is such a privilege, that we can call Sister Norma and say we want to come to the border and try to help. And a
yeah,
lot of people don't have those platforms. They feel helpless. And I am not good at feeling helpless, JJG. I am just not built to be helpless. But it's getting to know ourselves, it's balancing ourselves, it's um
yeah.
I just know that when I leave this earth, I threw every swing I had.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I think I oftentimes think about this advice you gave me when I was in high school. Now, it may not make sense to a lot of people, but it made sense to me. I think I was like thinking about like maybe it was like a couple of jobs or something. I forgot what the context. Remember what the context was? And I know you know
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
about
That's
to
why I
say, but do
post
you
on
remember
your
what the
post. I'm
context
always
was?
putting a machete on there. People are like, why
Yeah,
is he doing that?
yeah. You're like carve your own path with a machete, and I'm like, yeah, I feel like that's what I've been called to, right? I think I've oftentimes tried to fit the mold or like do the thing that other folks have done, go through the path more often
Uh-uh.
traveled, and like that hasn't been my path, right? So I think if there are folks who are listening to this conversation, who are also feeling the way that we are feeling about the state of the world, I think that encouragement of like, try something different, try something new, and see what you learn from it. I think it's like something that, again, has been really insightful and helpful to me over and over again.
I've seen you grow, Jonathan. Like I've known you since you were in high school. And
Mhm.
I can get emotional right now because to see someone feel their way around, and when I say feel, I mean capital F, capital E, capital E, capital L. And just there's so many of us that have been watching you grow. Shout out Katina, who I was just texting with yesterday, and so many others that just and that just love and admire and support you. Um, but we also count on you. And that's,
Hmm.
I mean, do you feel all of that? I mean, there's also that pressure that you have put on yourself from the time that you were very young, and
Yeah,
we have to take care of ourselves. Have you
yeah,
been taking care of yourself?
yeah. I have. It's been a newer practice of mine. I have a fantastic therapist that I see. I've been seeing her for 6 years. Shout out to her. I have a dog that is the love of my life. His name is
Oh, great.
Prey. He's a Boston Terrier. I think like recommitting to a faith practice has been really essential to the way my self care practices. I go to a church in Boston called Union. That is the first time in my life that I felt like I really belong in a church. It's in that church, and I'm like,
Such a great feeling, isn't it? Just
it is amazing. Every Sunday, I'm like, this is a real place. Like, this is a place that exists that I could just like show up and what? I was like listening to like one of the latest sermons about pride, and I'm like, my pastor's preaching about pride, and that is as I think that is exactly what God would want. Anyways, but just like thinking about all of these like sacred places and sacred people and sacred communities that I have built for myself, I think has been a really big part of my self care practice. I will say, Tony, that I do feel a lot of the pressure. I do feel like there are a lot of eyes watching me, and that's not new for me, but it does get tiring, right? And that's why I think for me in this season of my life, I want to be more playful. I want to be more innovative. I want to be more creative. I want to color outside of the lines more so than I have in the past. Because I think the way that I've processed those, like the pressure of like lots of folks watching me has been like, I can't mess up. I
mm,
have to do, I have, yeah, and like, I'm like, I don't want that anymore. Actually, that does not allow me to be the freest version of myself. I'm like, yeah, I am going to try things and they're going to fail sometimes and I'm going to learn and move on to the next thing, right? I think that is what I want the most for this next season of my career. I don't know what I'm gonna do, and I'm like really excited. I'm like, okay, it's okay. Like I will be in relationship with my people. I will like, drill down to the things that I believe in, and I believe that the path will come. But I'm not rushing it. I'm
and you
not rushing
shouldn't.
it.
It You're in this
Yeah,
moment and you're pivoting. But just keep in mind
yeah,
that perfection gets in the way of action.
yes. So many
Don't do it.
times,
I'm an
Tony. So many
imperfectionist. Like
times.
I actually
Yeah,
am proud of being imperfect.
yeah.
If you're trying to be perfect, it's unattainable. If you're trying to be actionable or better,
Unattainable.
it's attainable every day. I try to get better
Yeah,
every day. And let me tell you something too, that
yeah,
just to keep in mind, and here I am once again, even though you're smarter than I am, but I just want to tell you that, and it's something that I think you and I and others need to acknowledge the importance of being naive. I am so, I
yes.
clutch my
Yeah.
naivete that I think something can change and that I can do something.
Hmm.
I love it's,
Yeah.
I love being audacious enough to think that I can follow that and do something about something. I love being impatient with the changes I want to see. I coined the term impatient activism because I think all of our activists need to be a little more impatient. While everybody else is telling them to be more patient. You're going to be patient with some of the issues that we're talking about dealing with, and you can be a little reckless. That's how you innovate, by being reckless and collaborative and creative. And you're creative. And I would just love to just sit with you and see how I can support your vision. All I want from
Yeah.
you is a vision. I'll do the
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. Yes. Wait, but can I say something about this thing though? Because I think you're so right, Tony. I think it's um wow, and I'm getting emotional. Um yeah, I think this like perfectionism is It's like the killer of so much of our
Mm,
creativity, but I think it's also the killer of our freedom,
hmm.
quite frankly. Um, and I think a lot of that for me in the past, and I've grown past this, but a lot of that has been like coming from like a
Yeah.
low income working class family where like, you know, I am the success, you know, where I'm like the one that has more resources in my family. So like I support my family. So I can't fail because like there are people counting on me, right? So like I also want to name that that's like a real pressure that a lot of both like our people in general, but also our young people experience as well. And I think it's all of our work to be able to figure out how to break out of that, right? To be able to like get to a point where we
There's a
understand that
freedom in
like
that. That
there's
but
a
you're carrying
freedom.
so much
There's a
weight
freedom in that.
because you're carrying everyone's
Yeah.
expectations, everyone's needs, and it keeps you from that recklessness, that naivete, that audaciousness that I was talking about. And it's really liberating to get out there and just try stuff because the truth is, you know what I used to do with my kids? I would take their erasers away
What?
when they were drawing and writing. And I'd say, because I
Why?
didn't want them to think that it was a mistake what came out of
Mm,
their mind or out of their pencil. So go with it. And it's much more interesting. It's going to take you places that you can't imagine, these perceived mistakes. And I want them to have more of a recklessness when they're drawing. I would show them Basquiat
mm,
and I would say, do this. Do you think that guy had an eraser anywhere near him? He'd just throw another glob of paint on it and then create something. And so I have always said that is my mindset in everything I do. I've got Basquiat in my head. I've got
mm,
Thelonious Monk in my head. I've got
mm.
improvisers. I've been an improviser
Nice.
all my life,
Yeah.
and that's where creativity
Yeah.
happens. That's where change happens, like you said, in a different way. And so
Yeah.
I'm taking
Yeah.
I throw out all those
Yeah.
erasers, JJG. I want to see what you
Yes.
create,
All
baby.
right. I love it. I think my prayer for both myself and also other folks who are listening to this conversation is that they embrace the freedom to be, the freedom to do, the freedom to travel, the freedom to create, the freedom to try new things, right? I think that is what we need more of in our lives.
I have so much confidence in you
Mm,
to help us get there.
thank you.
If I'm going to invest in anyone, it's you. It's you. And look, so part of that investment is you getting your master's in public administration from Harvard. Míralo. Um, and and look, knowing you
Yeah.
and that person that I count on and adore, you took that moment of triumph to acknowledge and lift others, and you posted on social media. I'm going to read it. I'm quoting you. I am dedicating this degree to every person who has ever been counted out, to every person who has been deemed unworthy of living and thriving because of where they were born, their socioeconomic status, their gender, sexuality, or identity, their race, religious beliefs, or lack thereof, their disability, their political beliefs. May we learn to dream bigger dreams than we were told was possible. May we continue to rise like a phoenix as we weather the storms of life. May we choose freedom, grace, righteous anger, and transformation. May we channel our hurt experiences and gifts into making this world a better place for everyone. And may we shatter every systematic barrier built to keep us and our loved ones down. Amen. Ashe. Así será.
Mm,
Talk about that moment.
mm. I think there are so many, um, there's so many reasons why um, the status quo would not have me be in the places that I've been, right? Graduate from Harvard to build the things that I've built, to do the work that I've done. And I don't think I've done any of those things because I've been like extra special or like, you know, I'm sure I'm special, but like, you know, it's not because I've been super smart, but rather because I've had a community of people that have invested in me the same way that you were saying about investing in me. I've had, you know, like parents and aunts and, you know, la señora en la escuela, the like council, like I've just been so blessed, Tony. Um, I'm so grateful that I've been able to get this far, but I also know this is the beginning. And to me, walking across that stage wasn't just about me getting that degree. It was about it being a proof of
Mm,
concept. It was about being a little bit of evidence of what is possible when we give people an opportunity, right? When we allow those of us who come from the backgrounds that we do the freedom to be something that they never could have imagined. This was such an honor, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about me, but it was about all of us. Because I think that is what we are on earth to do, to make this a better place for all of us.
well, please know that you radiate, and therefore those supporters are drawn to you. It is a blessing,
Mm,
but it comes from what you radiate,
yeah.
and that's why people believe in you. You draw us in. It's a gravitational pull,
Mm,
and that is the unique ability to inspire. Not everyone has that. You do. You do, baby. And just so proud of you. I am actually just curious about seeing you grow up and your identity. You've had to take these journeys, whether it's professionally, whether it's in the community, and then with yourself. Um, can you talk about your identity, especially when you're at all of these intersections?
yeah. I wanna share a poem with you if I
Please.
may.
I basically read your statement like a
Um,
poem, by the way. You are a poet.
there's a poem that has risen to sacred text status for me. And it is by a poet by the name of Lucille Clifton. Um, and it is called Won't You Celebrate With Me? So she says, won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between sunshine and clay, my one hand tied to the other. Won't you celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and it failed? To me, that poem really is the essence of like what my journey has been, right? Um, I've been there's been lots of like mentors in my life, but in so many ways I've had to figure out who I am
Hmm.
on my own, right? To be able to carve out these paths, to be able to have the courage to be who I am in spaces that were not built for me. Um, to have the courage to try and fail, to hope that folks can accept me for who I am, and then find out that maybe at times they can't, and that's okay, and I keep moving, right? There were times that I was told that like it's not possible to be black and Latino at the same time, or you couldn't be queer and a person of faith at the same time, that you couldn't be all of these things, right? And again, through the grace of God, through like my community, through like the strength from my ancestors, I feel like time and time again, I have found the courage to be myself, not to be perfect, not to be the model, but just to be the authentic version of myself. That's like all that I ask of my life for myself. And at times that's meant like being away from the public eye for some time to take care of myself. At times that's meant facing unbelievable heartbreak, right? I think we only talk about heartbreak in the sense of like romantic, but we oftentimes face a lot of movement and professional heartbreaks. I've certainly experienced a lot of those myself. Um, but to me, every one of those is worth it if it means that I get to be who God and my ancestors and my family and myself dreamed for me, right? If I get to be the most free, audacious, courageous version of me, then all of that is worth
And
it.
that's what makes you perfect. You are perfectly you.
Mm.
Take me back. to you being 13 years old, arriving in Silver Spring, Maryland, which has been the epicenter for a lot of diaspora. You couldn't have landed a better place, to be honest with you. What were your first impressions of arriving in the United States from Panama?
Yeah. Um, so in some ways, I was really fortunate, right? Because I got to come on a plane on a tourist visa. I know that a lot of our family members, broader like diaspora family members, does not have that privilege. So I want to name that to
Hmm.
start. But getting here, I remember it was December 2005. I had a light jacket. I was certainly not prepared for DMV winters, and I remember being picked up by my uncle, who has since passed, in a silver Ford Focus. There were six of us fitting in that tiny car. So I remember the windows were like fogged up, and it was dark. And just like driving through those houses, um, like getting to Silver Spring, not recognizing the smell, like the houses smell different. Um, the food that we were given was very different. It wasn't my tamales and arroz con pollo, which is very different. Um, and I think, yeah, it was like a really turbulent time in that our family lost status shortly after our arrival. My uncle was deployed. He was part of the US military. And then I was enrolled in school, right, in middle school, having to learn a new language, having to meet my parents' expectations. They were like, go to school and do well. And I'm like, all right, that's what I'll do. But like, I'm being bullied because I speak English with an accent, or I don't understand how the systems work, right? Um, but I think a lot about just like what I now call them angels, like professors, counselors, like random staff of the school system who made it their mission to make sure that I was okay, right? Who like there was like someone who paired me with another student so that she could take me to like the lunchroom so she could just like show
Yeah.
me around, right? There was like someone who when we were trying to get to like the central office, like took time to explain like how the buses work because we didn't have a car. The car would belong to my uncle, and so like I think yeah, I just feel so grateful for all of those folks who were like really instrumental in like showing me tiny little acts of kindness that were really essential to my survival at that time. Um, I think yeah, I was really lucky to walk into a really welcoming community. I and I know that that's not the case for a lot of immigrant young people these days. Um, I think about after school programs like Liberty's Promise, who focused on giving and incorporating immigrant students to the US and like teaching us about like civics and scholarships and introducing us to like mentors from different communities. Like that's how I met Nancy Navarro and so many others, right? I think yeah, I am, I'm really clear that my accomplishments are not just mine, but also of my family, both here and in Panama, but also of every one of those people that were a part of my journey. My ESOL teachers, my counselors. I hope wherever they are proud that they were a part of this journey.
Shout out Nancy Navarro, one of the best to do it. Um, but I do remember when you were organizing as a young JJG
Yeah,
for the state of Maryland to
yeah,
pass the DREAM Act that is now celebrating 12 years of DACA. I was actually at the White House yesterday for the ceremony with the president.
yeah.
So I'm curious after doing that work and seeing the fruits of it and also the back and forth of it. I remember honoring DACA recipients on stage at the Kennedy Center and on PBS. And I was like,
Oh,
who am I going to get to
yes.
represent all the DACA students and DACA recipients? Oh, Jonathan and Belen,
Beleng, yes.
aka Bao Bao. And it was the two of you and Dolores Huerta and I presented that award to you all. I just you are a representation of so much more than just you. And I will say too, when we were doing that, I remember getting hundreds of texts and messages and emails from people that didn't qualify for DACA. And I remember in the speech
Hmm.
when I introduced you all to mention those that didn't even qualify as we're celebrating DACA. Let's not forget those that didn't qualify or didn't
Yeah,
apply. But can
yeah.
you talk about that evolution of you working as a young activist on DACA and then now looking at how it's being bantied around like by politics and by everything else?
Yeah, yes, I'm happy to. So I started organizing around immigration when I was about 16 or 17 years old. Shortly after I learned that I was undocumented and what that meant for my ability to pursue higher education, I was lucky that a couple of friends were organizing with Casa de Maryland and brought me to an organizing meeting. And from then on, I was hooked, right? So from going through like state and local organizing to pass the Maryland Dream Act, and then at the federal level, fighting countless of times to get some federal action for Congress to do something about this issue. Um, I will say, and to then eventually co-founding and leading the Undocu Black Network that worked on a lot of immigration issues, to trying to pass the Dream Act, to oh my goodness, it has been such a long journey, right? To think both about those of us who've had DACA, to like our parents, to other young people who, thanks to Donald Trump's actions when he was in office, like could no longer apply for the program, right? So I think it's been a really fraught issue over time, but it's been a fraught issue mostly on the political front because if you look at the latest polls, usually it's around either 60 or 70% of Americans support giving a pathway to citizenship to
Six,
undocumented young people. So like,
62% of registered
yeah,
voters
yep,
wanted to
yep,
wanted to
very clearly.
deport
So,
everyone who is undocumented in this country. And people
mm,
were in disbelief when I brought it up at a dinner the other night. And I was like, it's a poll that just came out. 62%.
mm, Hmm. Yeah, and I think how the issue has moved, how the political center around immigration has moved both left and right over time has been really fascinating to watch. That's something I did not expect, right? I think to see where the electorate is at, where the political leaders are on like what's possible, I think has been really difficult to stomach, even because I think we've been at better places over time. But I think I don't know. I don't have an overall summary of like how I narrate the overall story of like how we got into this point. I do know that I'm so grateful for a lot of the activists that
Mm,
have kept
yeah.
pushing all of these years because there's been so many generations of activists that I've come in, fought, got burnt out, left the movement, and others who've like come in, fought, burnt out, left the movement. Um, so I'm thinking, as I was watching the announcement from the president yesterday, I was just like thinking a lot about all of the momentum over what 20 years that like we've been fighting for legislative action from Congress. Grateful for like the action that is taken at the executive front. And yeah, I want to live in a world where these issues are resolved, where we have a system that works for our country, that works for our people, that takes people's humanity and dignity into account. That's not where we are today, but I still think that's possible.
Everything is possible. And
Yeah.
but it's possible if you focus on values, not political positioning. And it has to be based on your values. And I was sitting next to Krish Vignaraja from Global Refuge, who is one of my Sherpas in this space, along with you and others that I count on. And we are trying to continue this fight on behalf of human lives. These aren't just numbers and statistics. Border crossings are up to this. X amount of millions of people are trying. No, every single one is a human being that had to make a choice for what's better for their families and themselves and for this country because we are counting on the population rate is flat. What does that do for our economy if you don't bring immigrants in?
Yeah.
So it's and national security and everything else is tied. Uh, the workforce, it's all tied. to immigration. And there's a value proposition that every single Jonathan J. Green, every Antonio Tijerino, every Yemi Gambron bring to this beautiful country. Every single Belen Marquina bring to this country. Or Queen Star Akon, who's from Ghana, and she brings such value to this country. We all do, but you have to look at that value proposition, and you can't diminish it by playing politics or by succumbing to narratives and public opinion.
Yeah.
Jonathan, wrapping this up, I just want to ask you a few questions. We believe that culture comforts, and that is in a lot of different forms. So, what song is it that brings you comfort? What food brings you comfort?
So, um, I food. There's a lot that I actually had forgotten because we don't have a lot of Panamanian cuisine in the United States. There's not a lot of Panamanian restaurants. But I had this incredible. I had so many incredible meals in Panama. It was. My mouth is watering just thinking about that. But it would be some sort of like arroz con coco, and then, like the coco would be like from like a coconut that they just knocked down like around the corner with some like patacones, so I guess some people call them tostones. There would be some sort of like lentils, something, and con un guisado de pollo o carne, like some sort of that with like some potato salad on the side and some like fried plantain as well.
Like you're
It's a very
cooking a meal
elaborate meal.
on this podcast. It's hilarious seeing you.
Yes. So that would be that. I think song wise, I would have some be some sort of like salsa or merengue. I don't know if you saw there's a video of like me and one of my aunts
Did.
dancing salsa. It was like Juan Luis Guerra. And I have watched that video so many times because I could not
Made
like
me
I
happy.
that is all I wanted to do. That is to dance with my aunts and my grandma. That's all I wanted to do. So it would be some sort of like salsa merengue sort of like beat. Um, and then poem, you have that. Um, and I think, I don't know, there's like um, like touch is
Mm-hmm.
really important to me. Um, so like holding the hands of my friends and family members, like hugging them, not like a side, but like a full on hug, like at times, my aunt said that I was trying to squeeze the life out of them, and I was like, it's been 20 years of hugs, and I gotta get them all right now. So I feel like that like warmth
You're squeezing the
is
life
also a
into
part of
them,
that.
and you are going to get one of those hugs in
Yes,
Chicago when I see you tomorrow.
yes, but
And I also just want to say that there is power in vulnerability, and nobody is more powerful than you. I love you. I appreciate you. I respect
I
you.
love
I
you
count
too.
on you.
Thank you so
I
much.
support you in any way I can. Thank you very much for joining us on Fritanga Podcast.
I love you so much.
Love you too. All right, Jonathan.
Mwah, cuídese.